You have to be honest with yourself about where you are, what the next step is. My dad used to say that all the time. He used to say, you can only do one thing at a time. And, you have to do one thing and then the next thing. You can't just do everything at once. He said it over and over again, like every day of my life. You can only do one thing at a time.
I'm thrilled to bring you today's conversation. It's going to be the first of many about this wonderful figure in the double bass world. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Fumiko Wellington about her father, George Wellington, who left a lasting legacy on the double bass world. I mean, really just a remarkable career. He's influenced so many musicians. Fumiko and I get into all kinds of topics relating to her father and him studying with Warren Benfield at Northwestern University, to his move to Hawaii, which is one of the few places actually where their multiracial family could be accepted, could work and live in the United States at that time. And Fumiko shares all kinds of stories in this conversation about George, the double bass community in Hawaii, the Hawaii Contrabass Festival that he started up and she continued, all kinds of young bassists like Shawn, Conley, and Kiyoe, Fumiko's daughter. Just a wonderful conversation. I had such a great time chatting with Fumiko. We could have chatted for 5 more hours about all these topics. She was walking along on her phone outside in Hawaii. Just a great image of us, across the ocean, but having such a great conversation about so many topics that we both care so much about. Quick shout out to our sponsors that keep the lights on here at Contrabass Conversations. Thank you to D'Addario Strings, Steve Swan String Bass, Upton Bass, The Bass Violin Shop, and Colstein Music. And let's get into this conversation with Fumiko Wellington. How do people make it work? I mean, are people teaching or working second jobs or other gigs?
At least.
Yeah.
Most people teach a lot, which is kind of ironic because there aren't any jobs. So, the kids, people have lots of students and they just drop the violin or whatever it is when they get out of school, pretty much. But I guess, it doesn't hurt to have music lessons. Certainly it helps everybody.
Yeah.
But it's a strange world. People, certainly they're teaching more than they're playing. We don't play that much. So we've lost a lot of weeks here.
Oh, you have? Oh, that stinks.
Yeah. So we used to, when my father joined the orchestra, there were 44 weeks, and now we have 16. Okay. So it's gone, and the orchestra's died a couple times in between, completely. So right now it's called the Hawaii Symphony. That's the new name of the orchestra. After it died 10 years ago, it came back, but they changed the name. So we're now in our 7th season as a reformed orchestra.
Okay.
And struggling.
Boy, that's it. And was it the Honolulu Symphony at some point too? Yes. I'm trying to remember. Okay.
That's the original name of the orchestra, and then that was 100 years or so. It was one of the earliest symphonies in the country, actually.
Really? Wow.
And I think it started out as half civic orchestra. But it became a professional orchestra, and it became, for a while, it was amongst the big budget orchestras. We had a couple $1 million budget in a long time ago. When big budgets were very few in the country.
Yeah.
But that ended. We also had, great players. David Schifrin was here, Sally Watkins, and we had amazing people, but I don't know. Anyway, we're not supposed to be talking about that.
We can talk about whatever. It's all good. It's all interesting. So I have a friend. How long have you been living there?
Well, I grew up here. My parents moved here when I was about 1.5.
Okay.
So, my dad came to play in the orchestra. My mother was at the university, and that was 1956. I started in the orchestra in 1972, I think, or 71. That was my first job ever. And I played for a while, but then I left. So I went to Japan, and then I went to San Francisco, and then I went on tour with the Porky and Bess company in Europe.
Cool.
And that was a long tour. It was about 6 months until it fell apart, and then it was supposed to be a longer tour, but it fell apart. But half the company was from New York, and they all said, you belong in New York. You should be in New York. So I went to New York, and I stayed there for, I don't know, between 8 and 10 years. And I went to conservatory and played in a bunch of orchestras and, the usual New York thing. And then I moved to Europe for 15 years. And then I came back when my daughter was school age.
Okay.
So Kiyoe went to school in Hawaii, most of her school. And then she went to Interlochen and NEC and all that stuff. When she left, she was gone. So
It's great. I have seen Kiyoe at so many bass events over the years. I saw her in Prague. I've seen her I think she was in Italy this last summer too.
Oh, in Lucca, she was.
Lucca. Yep, and ISB, and just I feel like I see her every 6 months or something like that at some event or another.
I hope she shows up this summer. I'm not sure if she's going to make it. She just got accepted to the Lucerne Festival, so she's going to be doing that this summer. I'm not sure what the schedule is.
Yeah, I saw that online. That's great. That's really cool. Congratulations to her. That's wonderful.
Well, I'm glad. Me too. Because I think she had some kind of fellowship or internship with the symphony there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's ending, so I'm glad she found something else to do.
Okay.
Although I would like it if I could see her, but I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know when that's going to be. Anyway.
Right.
She probably has a lot of stuff to tell you because she has a whole bunch of friends in Europe that are doing new music and.
Yeah. I need to reach out. I'm reaching out to her about George, obviously, but I need to sit down and chat with her if she'd be interested as well, just about, because it seems to me like she's been developing a really cool career for herself and just seems like a really interesting person.
Yeah, well, she's not big into orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
She likes everything else, and including homeopathy and organic gardening, and she really is into it. So she. When she was at Tanglewood, she met a bunch of people that were farmers, and she started working on a farm. And then she went back to Massachusetts a couple times just to work on the farm. So, and she knows all the restaurant people. She learned how to make cosmetics, out of herbs and all this stuff. So she's studying that. We'll see. I really don't know much about what she's doing, to be honest, but she'll tell you, I think.
Yeah,
probably.
I will. We'll dig into it. Hopefully this summer if she's at ISB, but otherwise I'm going to reach out to her about George early. And it was funny. I was looking up. I just typed George Wellington into Google, like typical thing that I do, and one of the first things that came up was a post I had written.
Oh, really?
About Bass Festival from, I don't even know. It seemed like it was a while ago, maybe like 7-8 years ago that post was from. But
yeah, well, the first one was in 2000.
Okay.
And then it went until about 2016.
Okay.
The last thing I did, which was not a full-blown festival, like it got to be a very huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Madeline helped a lot, and everybody helped a lot.
Yeah.
The faculty was spectacular and volunteer, and it was great. But in the end, there began to be so many bass events.
Yeah.
And most of the participants came from outside. So I thought, they don't need to come here. My dad started it for the kids here.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids here are not interested particularly. They I don't know what it is, but they don't have time, amazingly.
Mm-hmm.
So it was so much work that I just thought, well, the kids from Juilliard and all the other kids from China and every place that they came from can go to a festival in practically any other city in the country. They don't have to come here. And our kids, they're not really interested. If they really want to go, they can go to one of those too. I mean, in the beginning, there were only a couple of events. There were like 2 or 3. And it just turned into this mushroom. I mean, there are bass events in every city. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. And it's great.
It's very interesting. No, there's been a real change. I was talking with people involved with the Richard Davis Foundation. You know,
he's so great. He helped me too.
Did he really? Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I met him at the ISB, and I was struggling because my dad had started this thing with Francois, and the 2 of them are just like, you know, both space cadets, and Francois he wanted to come, and my dad wanted to have this thing. I don't know. So I was talking to Mr. Davis about it, and he said, "Oh, you can do this. You can do this." And he said, "Do this, do this, do this, do this." And I just did what he told me because I had no idea. Yeah. And he was right, and it worked. Wow. So he's a great guy. I mean, he's just the greatest.
Yeah,
anyway.
He is a great guy. It's interesting though that I've been watching over the years as more and more of these events happen, and I think that places that have been pulling in from other parts of the country or world, it's been a struggle for them, because I know that Richard's event people were coming in from all over, but now we've got you name it. There's a bass festival practically in every state. So I think those are great for the local scene, but it's a little bit of a tougher. It's become a tougher road, I think, for people just to get people out to these events.
It depends, though. Yeah. How you do. Well, see, for instance, I always did mine in spring break, which is now. It's not hard to get somebody to come here when it's cold on the mainland. I mean,
right.
You tell them, "I don't have any money. I'm really sorry, I can't pay." And they say, "Oh, but I want to. I'll come." Yeah. And so they take a week off from the Boston Symphony. They take a week off from school. Anything to get out of the cold weather. Yeah. You cannot get them in the summer unless you have money. You can't get them at Christmas unless you have a whole lot of money. And so, but if you plan strategically, you can do it. I mean, it's doable. Yeah. It's just a whole lot of work. And honestly, I'm so glad that it's happening, though. Yeah. Because, passing the torch from person to person is much different than watching YouTube videos or reading books, or you know what I mean? Yes. When the person is standing in front of you, it changes everything. Yeah, absolutely. So, that it has been literally life-changing for so many of the students here, and the ones who came here from wherever they came, South Africa, Taiwan. I mean, every place. Yeah. When they meet the person, it changes them. I mean, the ISB has done that for thousands. Oh, were you able to get in touch with Catherine?
I haven't yet, but that's on my list for this week. So I will. She's a real
special one. She's a special one, and yeah, she was my father's favorite student at the end. So.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because she was the one who was with him until the end, and she didn't mind that her lessons would drag out into 2 and 3 hours. I mean, she didn't want to leave. She wanted to have a long lesson. And he liked that because he really was, Kiyoe had 2-hour lessons from 6 years old every day.
Wow, really?
And she thought that was normal. She thought that was just, everybody did it. And she didn't know. Yeah. But, it really, when you have that kind of a teacher, if you're lucky. Yeah. I mean, Shawn had, lessons, I mean, like all the time. He came to our house. My dad went to their house. He dragged Shawn to ISB. Wow. And boy, did he catch fire. I mean, it was remarkable what happened.
Yeah. Well, and talk about an interesting artistic path that Shawn's taken, right? I mean, what a ridiculous music. I mean, he and I were trying to get together when I was in New York, and it just didn't work out. I was in New York about 6 months ago to do some interviews, and it didn't work out. But we're gonna make it happen sometime soon.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's so interesting. Yeah, he's done a whole lot of. He's done a lot of good things.
This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass. And Steve travels far and wide here in the Western United States. Here's Steve on where he goes and what some of the benefits of being able to travel like that are.
You travel with it. You're going up to Oregon. You're going up to Seattle.
Up to Seattle,
yeah.
And back, out to Arizona, wherever people want to see a selection, they don't have options, or if I have a line on some basses I want to check out and maybe buy or trade, I have the option. That's the beauty of me not being tied to a workbench in a shop.
Steve works with some of the San Francisco Bay Area's best professional bass luthiers, people like Nathaniel Rich, Alex Friedman, and many others, to get basses playing beautifully. When someone comes to me asking where to look for a bass, whether they're a student or professional, or they're coming through town and they want to try out a great selection of basses, I always send them to Steve. Learn more at steveswanstringbass.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Steve. This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. Here's a great tip. Change your strings 2 at a time, removing them from the inside out, then replacing them from the outside in allows for easy access to the lower pegs, ensuring strings lay neatly in the peg box. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They offer the most popular brands of strings, pickups, rosins, and covers used by professionals around the world. Choose from brands such as Parastro, Acoustic Image, Tomastic, Rubner, Corelli, Colstein, Fishman, and more. Call or visit the shop in Greensboro to pick up the items in your shopping list. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, Chicago's amazing. I mean, George, my brother, studied there with Mr. Benfield.
Oh, really?
As did my father. They both studied with Mr. Benfield, and
Get out of
and
here.
they played the same bass.
What?
George, he was because my dad had a Zyex bass that he bought, I think, when he was really young for like $15 or something, with a bow and a stand and I don't know what. And he played in a jazz band for a while, and then somebody talked him into finishing high school and going to college. Anyway, he ended up at Bard, and then he finished at Bard and he went to Northwestern with my mom, and we lived in Mr. Benfield's house because they didn't have any money when they got there, and they had 2 kids. So
Wow.
we lived at the Benfields, and my dad used to take me to school with him and the bassinet and park me in the studio and practice and do whatever he did. Anyway,
Wow.
so cut to later, George finishes at Indiana, and then he went to study with Mr. Benfield, and by then he was playing my dad's bass. So, he took, that's the same guy, same bass. Amazing, huh?
That's amazing. Wow. And I love that. That Northwestern associate, I went to Northwestern and,
you did?
I did. Yeah. And, I went there to study with Jeff Braditich, but Jeff left right when I got there. So I ended up studying. Yeah, it's all good. And Jeff and I kept in touch over the years, but, I ended up studying with a wonderful teacher named Michael Hovnanian, who's in the Chicago Symphony, but I lived in.
Oh, yes. I know who he is.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know him.
Yeah.
I know who he is.
Oh, yeah. He's great. He and his wife Lori Ashikawa are super cool couple, and I still go and I stay with them in Chicago when I go back for various events. But yeah, Northwestern. My wife and I lived basically right across from Northwestern for years and years and years. So it's been fun to watch that school over the years. And Benfield, what a major, obviously like Jeff Braditich studied with Benfield. So did everybody. Like Paul Ellison
studied with him.
Rufus studied with him.
Yeah, Rufus studied with him.
Yeah.
A lot of jazz musicians have studied with him. I remember that he was just amazing. He used to call me because I was studying in New York for a while, and every time the Chicago Symphony came to town, he would call me. I don't even know how he got my phone number. I have no idea. But he knew that I was there, and he would call me and say, "The orchestra's in town. Are you coming?" And he would never say the Chicago Symphony's in town. He'd say, "The orchestra's in town. Are you coming?" Of course, I'm not going to say no to Warren Benfield, so I'd show up and visit them in the dressing room and get to see all the guys in their underwear with their playing cards and their bottles of gin. It was an adventure. Oh my God, he was amazing. He was a great guy.
That's great. Wow. I never met him. I had friends. He was still doing private lessons in Chicago way late into life. I remember some student, my wife went to Northwestern too, and my wife is 4 years younger than me. And I remember some of the bass players at that time at Northwestern had actually done private lessons with Warren Benfield in high school. So he
was working until he was doing real estate and stuff too. He was really busy.
Yeah.
And he was an interesting person.
For sure.
And anyway, let's see. So back to Catherine.
Yeah.
She is doing some really neat stuff. And now she's working with Mark Dresser. So that's another circle. It's amazing how everything repeats and repeats.
Right.
Because Kiyoe just got out of Mark's studio. And then Catherine said, I'd really love to go. So I wrote to Mark, and he took her. And he was a little on the fence about it because he didn't know her. And I said, you will never regret taking this girl. She's going to work her butt off, and she's going to be great.
Wow.
And he called me after school started. He said, man, she's so great. She writes down what I say. She takes the lessons. She does what I say. It's not Kiyoe. And, he loves her. He loves her. And so she's having the best time. And now she plays in that group that I can never remember the name of. Equinox or whatever it is.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
And so that's great for her. She's having a fantastic time, and I'm so glad for her. It's just super duper.
That's great. Mark, I can't say enough good things about Mark. What a fantastic musician, and talk about somebody who has found a creative path of his own, and just such integrity as a musician, and just such a fascinating. Yeah.
He is a prince. The man is just special. I mean, he's extraordinary friend and human being. I'm so lucky, that he took Kiyoe because he treated her like a daughter. He said, you need pots and pans. You need a place to stay. I mean, really, if you need anything, amazing man. I'm really lucky.
Oh, he's great. I've had the chance. I've known him for years. He and I were on the ISB board back 12, 13 years ago. And then I got the chance. I've seen, I see him probably once every year or so at something or other. But I got the chance both to see him working with a bunch of bassists in Tijuana for this bass festival down there. And then I went and got to go to UC San Diego and see him in action teaching, and then do an interview with him. And that's a special campus too. Oh,
really
yeah,
special school.
Well, it's such a great mission that they have too. Just in terms of studying music, what an exciting place to be associated with.
And they have everything on earth that you could possibly want. I mean,
yeah. I
mean, everything. It's amazing. It's great.
It is. Wow. How cool that you have that connection, that Benfield connection. And then tell me about the Francois connection that your father had. How did he meet Rabbath? How did that all transpire?
I'm guessing, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think that they met at an ESTA convention.
Oh, okay.
In somewhere like Lyon or something like that. Because my dad used to go to every conference. He went to all the ESTA conventions. And he met Francois, and then he just wanted Francois to come here. And Francois says that my father tricked him. And you got to get this story from Francois. It's something like he gave me a blank piece of paper or something, and I signed it. Why he did that, I don't know. And then my dad just wrote up this whole agreement, And so Francois, I don't know. It's just such a Francois story, but
Yeah.
you have to ask him.
I will.
So they show up. My dad suddenly says, "We're having this festival." I'm like, "What festival? When is it?" Gave me the date. I said, "So where's it going to be?" He didn't know. I said, "Well, where are they staying? I mean, who's coming, actually?" And he said, "Oh, Francois is coming. He's bringing his assistant." I'm like, "Okay, great. Where are they going to stay?" "I don't know." "Where are you having this thing?" "I don't know." So I'm like freaking out because it's in like 6 weeks. And I said, "Well, are there any brochures or anything?" I mean, I nearly fell apart. But then I went into high gear asking everybody I knew in town for favors, found a place for him. And then suddenly people found out that Francois was coming here. Suddenly Barry Green was coming. Suddenly Frank Proto was. All these people just invited themselves. And they said, "Oh, we'll just come."
Mm-hmm.
But I had 10 people on my hands. And I was like, wait. So I had to buy and then people showed up, though. I mean, we had the first one had 35 students because my dad was alive. So none of his students could even think about saying they weren't going to come. They was no. And then everybody else, too, he just cornered all the teachers. So he got all the kids to come. After that, it started to be difficult. But, I was able to get other people from the planet Earth, just the kids from Hawaii. I don't know. Anyway, so that's how it started, though.
Wow.
I think my father went to Paris to study with Francois, but Francois wasn't there. It's one of those things. So he worked with GP. Do you know GP?
No, I haven't met. Yeah.
He doesn't play really anymore. He moved back to Venice and he opened a restaurant. It's a very fancy, very popular restaurant. But he was Francois' assistant for a while, and he came with Francois here. So that's how it started. And then after that, it just was every 2 years it happened. And it just grew and grew because every time I went to the ISB, I'd meet somebody else that I thought would be great. Mm-hmm. I'd go watch the person teach, and then I'd ask them, what would it take? And usually if I said that they could come to Hawaii, they didn't even hesitate. I mean, they just said, "Oh, yeah, I'm coming." So that part was easy, but then getting everything else together, but it kind of mushroomed on its own. Mm-hmm. We had there were a bunch of concerts. I should send you some programs.
I'd love to check it out. Yeah.
It was a really neat thing. And Madeline helped, of course, a lot. Yeah. I mean, you can call her at any time of the day or night, and she will either pick up the phone or write you an email in 5 minutes. I mean, it's and she's got an answer,
Right.
Sometimes she'll say, "Give me a minute," and it'll take an hour, but that's unusual. I mean, it's just, I don't know how she does it. She's like a miracle worker.
Yeah.
So she helped me a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that's why I help her.
Well, and she's got a lot of wisdom, just all those years of organizing and very creative solutions, and she's experienced, whatever roadblock might be coming up. So now she's
anything.
Great.
Yeah. But I think she's just got a special kind of mind and also a big heart.
Yeah.
A lot of people are smart, and a lot of people have been in the business for a long time, but nobody's like her.
Yeah.
And from the get-go, when I started, because Kiyoe was very young the first time she went to the ISB. And I was just a mom. I'm not a bass player. So I was, I watched and listened a lot, but I volunteered too, because I thought that they look like they need help. Come on, they need help. And I volunteered every time I went, and she finally just put me on staff. So, so now I know that I'm going. She always says, "Well, does this schedule work for you? I'm sending you a ticket," and then I go and I work like all the time. In the beginning, I only worked when I had time. And now I work all the time. So I'm happy to do it because I feel like I owe her so much. I mean, the ISB has done so much for me. Crazy.
I think so many of us feel, bass players or non-bass players in your circumstance, but feel that way. Like I look back on all the years I think I've been a member most of my life at this point. And it's just, it's done so much for me, and meeting these various people at the different conventions. It's just phenomenal. And, for not being a bass player, you probably know more about the bass than just about any non-bass player.
And I'm really happy to be around bass players.
Yeah.
I mean, I already knew a lot of bass players before I met the ISB because I lived in a neighborhood in New York that was mostly bass players and somehow basses and clarinets or something. But I knew a whole lot of bass players, and they were the people that I hung out with. So bass players are not like violinists. They're much friendlier. They're much more sharing, and then I think their function in the orchestra is much more down to earth and not to make a pun, but
right.
Because they're the foundation of the sound and the intonation and everything else. I mean, they have a different way of relating to people, and I like it.
Yeah.
So I would never go to a violin convention. I mean, seriously, never. I mean, people would be dying. They would be, blood on the floor, and it's not like bass players are friendly. There's almost never an uncomfortable moment at the ISB.
Oh, I know.
Never.
I know. Well,
it's just a big, schmooze. Everything is a big hug, and what are you doing? And can I hear you play? And it's so great.
It absolutely, and Francois is a great example of that sort of energy. You just watch him. And what's the old line? It's like bass players get together and they put on a convention. Violinists get together and they make a competition, right, or something along those lines. I think there's something to that.
It's pretty much Although I mean there are plenty of competitions, but it's not the same. And right now, I mean, it's an interesting time with bass openings everywhere.
Isn't it
I'm
weird?
Not sure why that is. It's very strange.
I know.
He always said there's bass openings in every city in Europe. I mean, like every orchestra has openings. And she said, I will never get hired in Germany because I play French, but there's other jobs. I mean, all over Scandinavia, Iceland, France, England. I mean, like everywhere. I don't know why that is. Strange.
Well, for years and years, I'd been hearing this rumor that when the baby boomers finally retire, there'll be this wealth of jobs, and you've heard that in other areas too. And I wonder if there's something to that because I'd been waiting for decades for this supposed glut of jobs. And the first time ever I opened up International Musician, I'm like, wait a minute, every other ad's a bass opening. I mean, for real. And then you go to Europe. Yeah, it's a good time to be a bass player looking for some sort of employment like that.
Are you an orchestra player?
Yeah. That's my background. So I do a little bit of. I occasionally sub in the San Francisco Symphony now and play another couple gigs. But for years and years, especially when I was living in Chicago, lots of freelancing, subbing in lyric opera and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of an amateur jazz player. I love it, but that's my background.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Well, you must know a lot of people I know, though.
I think we probably know a lot of the same people.
George, my brother played in lyric, too.
Get out of here. Really? I didn't know that. Okay.
And he's been out of Chicago for a long time. He's been in New York for easily 30 years, I guess.
Okay.
You should talk to him. I gave you his phone number, right?
Yeah. You passed that along. I'll get in touch with him.
He's a really interesting person. And actually, I think he's coming to the convention this summer. I think it's because he was at ISB. He was at Indiana. So I told him, if you don't come this time, you're an idiot. You're an idiot.
Right. Yeah. So, alma mater.
Last time we were in Ithaca, and I said, we're close. You better come. You're an idiot. He was recording Paramore. So he couldn't. But I said, well, he said, I think I'm going to be there. And I said, well, what about Paramore? And he said, well, I don't have to do it every year. I don't have to do it this year. So I guess he's good because he knows that Edgar's going to be there, and he and Edgar were like best friends.
Oh, wow.
They still are very close.
Yeah.
I mean, Edgar played piano on his graduation recital. So
really, wow, that's
great. He's a great pianist. He's a great pianist. Most people don't know that, but he's really good. Anyway, they were like bread and butter. When I met Edgar, he came to New York with George to get his bass looked at by somebody who lived across the street from me. So he landed in my apartment with a bunch of cassettes that he was going to truck around town. And what an interesting guy he was. I mean, already I could see why George and he got along. And I think they drove from New York to Chicago to see the last game at Wrigley without nightlight.
Oh,
because they knew that they were going to.
That's great.
So they went to watch a baseball game And now it's a different, but I remember going to a game there when I was visiting my brother in Evanston, and the Cubs won. Imagine that.
Yeah,
it was a phenomenon. They never win, but they won that day.
That's great. Yeah, they rarely win. I was at I was at the Cubs game where Sammy Sosa had this famous he had a corked bat that broke in the game, and it ended up being a major news story. And I just randomly, I like almost never went to Cubs games, but I happened to be at that one. So
wow.
Consistency among bass lines, consistency among the different products you offer. That's something that Upton Bass excels at. Here are Gary and Eric from Upton Bass on that topic.
Like continuity of product, which we have fabulous reputation. We've got great product across the marketplace.
Do you have seconds? No.
Right, yeah, exactly. No.
Seconds are in the dumpster.
For almost 20 years, Upton Bass has been delivering top-notch basses at every price point, consistency and continuity, like Gary said, across the line. And if the wood's not good, like Eric said, it goes in the dumpster. They are the real deal, made in America. Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Samuel Colstein, who founded Colstein & Sons back 70 years ago at this point, Sam was largely self-taught. Here's Barry Colstein about how his father got into the business.
It was mainly self-taught, but I will pay homage to people that need to be paid homage. He did study a bit with Al Eisenstein, who was a great repairman in Manhattan. He was considered one of the top. And Al was very gracious. He allowed my father to sit at his side, watch him work. But a lot of it was self-taught. My father was a very ingenious person. He really would look at a problem and figure out 5 ways of doing it, and then choose the right way always.
Ever since those early years, Colstein & Sons has been working to solve problems for bass players, provide them with ever better instruments and new opportunities in terms of travel basses and cases and all sorts of things that we need as bass players. Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Colstein, for everything that you do and for sponsoring the podcast. That is great that your brother played in Lyric. I definitely need to talk to him about that. My former student, I am so proud of this guy. He is now acting principal bass of Lyric Opera. I taught Ian Hallis. I taught him from 5th grade through senior year of high school. And so it's so fun to see these people go on. And Ian studied with Paul Ellison, and it's such a small world.
God,
this
Paul's
bass world.
One of my heroes.
Yeah, for sure.
A god. I have pictures of Paul and Kiyoe when she was at her first ISD.
Oh, really?
He had a master class, and somebody said, you should have her play for Paul. All these other people came running up to her, and they asked her to play. Frank Proto, Barry Green, all these people. But somebody said, you should have her play for Paul. So I didn't even know who he was. So I found him, and I said, could my daughter play for you? And he said, oh, bring her to my class. I'll put her up first. But, the class was all conservatory students.
Yeah.
And then this 6-year-old comes on the stage, and she only could play one tune. But he sat on the floor with her for half an hour and, talked to her about the bass. And it was amazing. I mean, I still have photos from there. It's amazing. And he's become, such a mentor to her.
Yeah.
He's just, I love him. And when she has problems, he can solve them like instantly.
Yeah.
Without even seeing her. He says, how are you standing? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. What are you playing? Mm-hmm. And he'll say, oh, I know what it is. It's this. And he'll be right.
It's crazy, isn't it? He's just functioning on this level that I admire so much. And there's another person with Chicago connections. Actually, Paul grew up in Rogers Park, and I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, isn't that funny? And. I think he spent, I might be getting this wrong. I think he spent some time at Northwestern. I might be wrong on that, but I thought Paul mentioned something like that. But he'll bring out, like you start talking to Paul about where you're from. And I mean, he's super proud of his Chicago roots.
But didn't he study with Benfield too?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's right.
So he must have been at Northwestern.
Yep. That's it exactly. He did study with Benfield. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Man, that's a whole thing that ISB should do something to remember Warren Benfield.
Yeah.
I have not heard his name come up, but there's so many of his students.
That's true. That's a great idea. I wonder why nobody's done that. That is a really good idea.
It's I think his wife has passed away now, but too bad. There are people though that were around him, and and maybe Rufus knows stuff, you know.
Yep. I mean,
Francois just had a birthday, you know. He just turned 80 or something. Let's see, 19. I can't even remember. He's 80 something, or he's 90.
He's definitely
up there.
Yeah, but there's a great example, like you watch Francois play at his age, and just the ease of his playing, and he can still get up there and play these, you know, solo pieces for a piece after piece after piece. That alone says something about his technical approach. You know, even if
he doesn't waste energy.
I know, sure. Right? That's amazing.
He's also very strong, though. I mean, remarkably so. For a person of his age, watch out. He's very strong. And, you know, he still practices like 5 hours a day. It's not...
That's amazing.
That's his day. He gets up, he makes an unbelievably strong coffee, like your hair would just either straighten or curl. And, you know, he drinks one of those, and then he goes and plays. And then then he makes another one. Goes back in the kitchen with his... He never gets out of his... Jalaba. He doesn't put pants on unless he's going outside. So he's there, he's wearing his gown, you know, he goes and makes another espresso, and then he practices some more, and then he'll make a few phone calls, make another coffee, practice all day, practice. And then he might go out to shop or something, and then play some more, make some hummus, you know, he's an amazing guy.
I need to go spend some time with him in France. I have never, he was actually one of my very first podcast guests back like 13 years ago or something ridiculous like that. And
that must have been interesting.
It was. Well, and also just like, I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like a guy with this like cheap little recorder device. And I found myself chatting with Francois Rabbath, and, you know, but I would love to just go spend, I have no excuse. I need to just book a trip and do it.
You should do it.
Yeah, I know. Sooner rather than later.
We would love to talk to you.
I know. It's gonna happen. I'm gonna get on the computer this week and just book a trip. Find out when he's free. Yeah.
And go, you know, take a lesson.
Yeah.
He always has a bass. You can play a bass that's at his house. So you don't have to take a bass with you. Man, you can learn a whole lot. Even I learn, and I'm not a bass player, but.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you all about the violin, and he has no problem. He says, look, you should just, he'll tell you, bring your violin. I remember that when I was in Paris once for a few weeks. He said, bring your violin, come over for dinner, bring your violin. Amazing.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, and his new technique, his technique, you know, like just the concept of positions, how similar that resembles the way you're thinking of positions on the violin. You know, when you expand it open just a little bit and you can play a diatonic scale across the instrument. I mean, I always notice those similarities, you know, between that technique and what the way a violinist might think, or at least in some ways.
Well, he's just really, luckily he didn't have any hindrances, you know, because he taught himself everything.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the handicaps that people have that had classical training.
Yeah.
Or, you know, traditional training. He made everything up. And so it all works because he works for him. And that's a completely different thing than you trying to adjust your way of playing to somebody's school of violin. You know, it's just, it's really interesting. He's so creative, and he's so honest. He's just a really, I think that's what it maybe boils down to. You have to be honest with yourself about where you are, you know, what the next step is. My dad used to say that all the time. He used to say, you can only do one thing at a time. And, you know, you have to do one thing and then the next thing. You can't just do everything at once. He said it over and over again, like every day of my life. You can only do one thing at a time.
That's a good line.
His students were, he went at such a slow pace that you couldn't figure out what he was thinking. I mean, it was so slow, but he knew what he was doing. And that's why, you know, Kiyoe never made a mistake. She never made a mistake. It wasn't allowed. So she would master something, and it would be something really small. And then he would add something. So when she went to school at Interlaken, she was in Derek Weller's class, and she called me about a month into school, and she was crying, and she said, I don't think I'm good enough to be here, and I don't think I should be here. I should, maybe, I don't know what to do. So I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I just can't, I'm not cutting it. I can't play. And I thought, something's really wrong with this picture. I mean, so I called Derek, and I said, and he in the first place came after her. He invited her to the class. And he made it possible for her to go after lots and lots of going around and around. Because I said, I can't afford it. There's no way. And he said, we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. So he wanted her there. And she gets there. I called him up and I said, well, what's going on? Kiyoe's crying. She's like not feeling up to the task. And he said, I don't know. He said, I think she's doing great. And he said, oh, you know what it probably is? He said, she can't fake. Oh. You know, he said, she plays everything. If she misses one note, she gets really upset. And he said, everybody else is playing 2/3 of the notes at the most.
Yeah.
And she can't do that. She plays everything and she memorizes everything. And so, you know, she would, and so then I relaxed a little bit because, you know, he said she'll have to learn how to fake, which is an important skill actually, that she did learn, I guess. I mean, I'm guessing. But isn't that funny?
It is really interesting, you know, isn't it? Yeah.
Because that's how my dad taught, so slowly that you didn't make mistakes. You know, you played everything. And so, wow. Yeah, that's how she started.
That's a valuable lesson, though. That you know, I think I'm trying to tell myself that every day. Just focus on one thing, Jason. Just hold down, slow down. You know, and that's really cool that your dad that was the approach.
Yeah, he was remarkable. I mean, and he had so many students that were all different, and each one he had a different approach. It's not like he taught everyone. You couldn't say the George Wellington method. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was every student had their path, and Shawn is the perfect example.
Yeah.
Because he learned in a different way, and he was also doing a whole bunch of stuff. When he came to my dad, he was wrestling and he was doing I don't know what. And finally, my dad said, "Look, if you want to wrestle, that's okay with me. I'm not going to feel bad." I think he would have felt bad, but he said, "If you want to wrestle, do that. But if you want to play the bass, you have to stop wrestling. You can only do this." and Shawn had to think about it, but then he quit wrestling. And so he, but you know, he became like a mission for my dad. I mean, really, they were together so much of the time it was ridiculous. Either one of them, he was either at our house or my dad was at their house all the time. And Shawn started, you know, he caught fire. He went to the ISB. I think he met Paul Ellison. They went to Houston. That was in 97, I guess, because it was before I went to the ISB. Kiyoe was only 4 then. She wasn't playing it. But he came back changed. I mean, he couldn't not practice. That's all he did.
Wow.
And he started writing and playing, you know, jazz and doing this and that. I mean, it was amazing. And now, you know, look at him now. He's amazing.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
He's a great teacher. He's a great teacher. He's come to the festival a couple times to teach.
Oh, that's cool.
Great.
That's great. I still have yet to meet Shawn in person, but you know, Nick Walker has recommended, like he was one of the people that he's can't recommend highly enough in terms of me chatting with him for an interview or just as a player in general. And isn't that a great to me that so many different paths have been taken by your dad's students. I always think of that as a mark of a great teacher. And you look at all the people that have been associated with Francois and a very similar, right? I remember, I don't know if you were at Francois' recital in Ithaca for the convention, but...
yes, I was.
Okay, so then you remember, you look up on stage and my goodness, you know, all these different players, it's so many different paths they've taken. You've got John Clayton and Lynn Seaton up there with Kate Jones and all these other players. And it's just that I couldn't help but marvel at just all the different paths that those people are on, and they're all united by that. And it sounds like, you know, similar, like Shawn is on a totally different path than Kiyoe or so many of these other people, Catherine, that have been, you know, yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think it's different when the teacher makes it about you and not about them. You know, that's, you know, he wasn't Dorothy DeLay. He was not. He was George Wellington. So you ended up saying you. You know, you would be you, and you couldn't say if somebody plays. You couldn't say, "Oh yeah, that's a Wellington student," because they don't all play the same way. It's pretty neat actually. But you know, and I everybody in our family played something because there was you didn't get to choose. I mean, my father says that I wanted to play. He said, you know, you chased me around, you wanted a violin. And I was like, because he taught a lot. There were always students in the house. And he said I used to try and get in the car with him when they left with my violin. I would like take my little quarter size. I'd try to get in the car with him and drive away. But, so everybody played something and we all had lessons. Like, I don't know how he even did that because he had symphony and he taught school. But, I know about my lessons because I was the oldest. So my dad would go to rehearsal at night and he would come home from rehearsal over there was no tunnel through the mountain when I was little. So you had to go over the mountain. Ooh. And it took quite a while and it was windy and everything. But anyway, he would get home and then he would wake me up. And that's when I had a lesson.
Wow.
So it was like every day. So it was about maybe 10:30 or so. And I remember standing there in my pajamas. And if I was, you know, sometimes I'd be really tired. And he would get really angry with me if I started yawning or if I started waiting, you know, because he was tired too. But, you know, so I had a lesson. And just like Kiyoe, I had a lesson every day. And it was good for me. I mean, obviously I went ahead very fast when I was young, but I also thought that it was normal. I didn't know that there was a different way to learn. So
wow.
Kiyoe was so surprised when she found out that some of her friends only had a lesson like once every 2 weeks, or you know. Once, she said, "What? Don't you have a lesson every day?" I thought that was so hilarious. I had no idea.
That's remarkable. And wow, and he was teaching school as well, doing all that.
Well, that was in those days. That was part of being in the symphony. It came with a school job.
Really?
So
okay.
Everybody taught school and played, and that's when the school programs were really strong. Because every single school had an orchestra and a band, and they all had a chorus, and you know every kid could be in it, and the state supported it. So that's completely the opposite now. Many schools have no music, and the ones that do have music, sometimes the parents have to pay.
Yeah,
but in those days, since all the musicians knew each other, I mean, because they were in the orchestra. So they would help each other too. It was kind of, you know, it was a real brotherly effort. Everybody would go to each other's school to help out on weekends. And there was a music store that repaired instruments on Wednesday and gave them back to you on Saturday. And, you know, it was great. There were so many events for children, you know, festivals and recitals and all kinds of things. So now it's really not the same, but
yeah,
it's become more of an elitist thing, you know, to take music lessons has become for kids with money. And it's not the same, unfortunately. But yeah, everybody taught school and private lessons too.
Yeah, reminds me about thinking back to like and I know Chicago Symphony is a different animal and a different budget and everything, but I can't help but think about like those like 40s and 50s in Chicago, and you had this ridiculously strong public school program in Chicago. Merle J. Isaac, the famous Merle J. Isaac, he was a public school teacher in Chicago, and which I think
I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So he was doing all those arrangements on the side, and he was one of many just outstanding educators there. And now you look, and you know there are a couple good schools in Chicago. certainly, and a lot of people trying hard, but the landscape is totally different. Music, maybe in a handful of schools, or certainly orchestrally in a handful of schools, and we got similar struggles here in California for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. It's interesting because I did not know that he was a teacher, a school teacher. That's interesting.
Right.
But I was in Detroit with Kiyoe a few years ago for the Sphinx competition.
Yeah.
And I got to, because at that time, Alex Hanna was in Detroit.
Yep.
And he was another one. He came to Hawaii from Paul's studio, I think. And he came with Hal Robinson.
Oh, right. Yep.
As Hal's assistant. The one year that Francois could not come, he said, call Hal. So I did, and I was not thinking that he would come, but he did. I never thought he would come, but he did. And I said, please bring somebody to be with you, so you have a help. And he brought Alex, and Alex was just practicing and practicing and practicing. And the week after he left, he won the Detroit audition.
Wow.
So he went from here and took that audition. And then he knew Kiyoe from the festival, and she was on her way to Interlochen. We stopped at his house and stayed, and he gave her a whole bunch of lessons, like 4-hour lessons, and all the excerpts, all this stuff. He's a remarkable person too, really interesting. And now, when I see him in his Chicago Symphony costume, he wears a suit all the time. He used to wear shorts and sneakers.
I know.
And now I see him, and he's now Mr. Hanna, and I'm like, wait a minute, aren't you a kid?
Yeah.
Anyway, but man, he's somebody. And so we went to the hall. That's what I was going to tell you. He said, this is where the youth symphony rehearses.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's a beautiful hall. And I thought, man, wouldn't that be great if our youth symphony had their practice in the hall?
Yeah.
That is so neat than not to practice in a cafeteria or, And I think there are something like 5 orchestras in Detroit, 5 youth orchestras in that part of the city. And for a city that has, is coming back from the dead pretty much, that's remarkable to me. They have a strong program going on. And they have Sphinx, which is helping a lot of kids get started early. So maybe there's hope.
Yeah, it is. It's remarkable what's going on there. And my wife and I were in Detroit about 8 or 9 years ago, and I'd love to go back and just see, because it sounds like things were starting to pick up in terms of transformation then. Alex has been a real dear friend for me over the years. He and I taught together at DePaul University, actually. So I've gotten to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and just great. We've had him involved in the Chicago Bass Festival, obviously, and other events. And it was fun talking to people who knew Alex before his professional orchestra days. Yeah, he definitely made the transformation, and lots of blazers, and very dapper looking all the time. But what a great guy, and what a just magnificent musician. And
oh, absolutely. Goodness, such a great musician. But Hal's no slouch.
Hal's no slouch. Yeah, for sure.
It's so great to see him. I think he's teaching in New York now too.
He is at Juilliard. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's lucky for them, boy. It's great.
Yeah.
Really great.
Fumiko, thank you so much for chatting with me. And like I said at the outset, we're going to be having many more conversations about George, and I'm sure this will get turned into an article, into various kinds of resources. I love doing that, but I love putting out these full conversations just so you can be there in the room with us and follow along as we're both chatting across the ocean about these things that we care so much about. And if you want to reach out to me about George, or about double bass pedagogy, or just about yourself and your journey, feedback at Contrabass Conversations will put you in touch with me. And I just love hearing from people. And maybe this is your first episode, or maybe this is your 600th, because I think we're coming up on 600. But regardless, welcome. Thank you. Great to have you with us here. And Contrabass Conversations is produced by a great team. I want to give a huge shout out to Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. And Mitch is making beautiful basses in the Dallas area. You can learn more at mitchmooring.com. And thank you to Krista Copper for going through and and cataloging every topic we talk about here. That allows us to go through and synthesize and pull different episodes together into best ofs and topic-related episodes, and it's just such a tremendous resource. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.